All right. So ready? So
Mhm.
here we go. We are live in three, in two, and one. Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. Today, we have the distinct honor to be joined by Hans Elige, now of India, but you've come up to me basically from Discord, I believe, and that I understand you have quite the story. So why don't you
Mm.
walk through your origin, your whole journey of life so far and tell us where you've been and tell us where you want to go. So who is Hans? Go from right from the beginning and right to where you are.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, this will be the first time I kind of speak about myself in such a public setup, but I would take it as a new experience. So basically, to make it simple, I was born sighted, and until when I was 6 years old, everything seemed to be fine until I got a fever, and of course, I was prescribed a sort of antibiotic that I drank, but unfortunately, there is a certain p- portion of the human population that are genetically predisposed to be allergic to that medicine, sulfamide. Some people might recognize that. They often cause something called Steven Johnson syndrome. So basically, I reacted against it. So unfortunately, when I came out of that entire ordeal, my eyes were collateral. So I lost my vision during that time, and not all of it, but most of it. And it was around when I was 7 years old that my parents, because it was really hard for them to understand what kind of setup will be suitable for me, because at the end of the day, they felt like a blind child is someone who will have difficulty succeeding in anything, especially in a society where I was born, which is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There, at a time, which was in 2006, the environment regarding the visually handicapped was not well developed when it comes to social and educational and economical. So there were no counseling or social welfare that were established to assist people with disability. So unfortunately, most parents who have a blind child, they just didn't know what to do with a child. Most of them will just keep the child until the child grows, become old, and hoping that someone will always be there to kind of babysit the person for the rest of their life. So they thought that I will be doomed to the same fate. But thankfully, on some whims, my mother heard about a blind school that was built to assist people of my condition. So she approached them, which is basically a school called Nuru, which means light in Swahili, a language spoken in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and some other Central African countries. So when I was kept in Nuru, I was studying there in a blind school. But ironically, despite of me studying in a blind school, they still let me study normally, like use the normal sighted writing style. They introduced me to Braille immediately because I was not completely blind. And for some reason, they never realized that if they just let me use Braille, life would have been easier. But I don't know why they did it. Why rather than just putting me into Braille, they just let me use a pen. I used to look closer to the paper and read. I couldn't use eyeglasses because due to my condition, what happened is that I lost my corneas, and because of that, one of the legacy that I inherited from Steven Johnson syndrome is the fact that I have permanent dryness, so I have no tears. Unfortunately, our corneas cannot survive without tears. So basically, because of that, I lost my natural corneas, and I had to surgic. I had to go through surgery, which they basically remove corneas. They put some rings there. It was messy, but it worked. Unfortunately for that, using any glasses to improve my vision wouldn't have made any difference. So I had to look closer to the paper. And I had an intervention that I was supposed to do after 6 years because I was too young at that age. So they thought like it would be more appropriate to let me grow for a while. So yeah, so when I finally grew and I was 11 years old, mm, the doctor realized that it is time for me to have that s- artificial corneas implant. So so artificial corneal transplant that was now required to help me move on society with a better condition. Just it won't make me sighted, but it was meant to improve at least my situation. So we started applying for the most appropriate hospital that we think will be able to handle my condition with absolute care. So I was initially meant to go to either Belgium, France, Morocco, South Africa, where I went to have my first surgery in 2007, and of course, South Korea. But here's the deal. When we started applying for my trip to South Korea, the person was supposed to send me the invitation letter, got some personal issues going on with his family. So he delayed that. During that time when we were waiting for him to send me the invitation so that I can get the visa, another friend of my mother, which we just met by accident, said that, hey, I heard that you're taking your son out of the country. She said to my mom, I remember her saying that. And my mom said, yes. My mom basically told her everything. And she said, but India is better because I heard that people go there for kidney transplant and everything. So I even had a couple of relatives went there. She basically gave a testimony for on behalf of India and their medical system. So it was on that basis that my mother, she was not even serious about it. She just said, I will consider that. And she even sent her all the documents because her friend she insisted, said that you should send me every document and I promise you, India is the better option. My mom just did it out of courtesy because she was trying to help. So my mom didn't want to sound rude. So she basically sent her everything, not even expecting much from it. But strangely enough, we got a visa from India faster than South Korea. That's how my life trajectory basically changed. Rather than going where I was meant to go, I went to India because India was waiting for me. I just needed to buy a flight ticket. So that was like in late 2011. And at last, I finally came, and the surgery was initially the surgery was projected to only last 1 month. That's how the delay was meant to be. But then when we came here, the doctor realized that the situation was far worse than the predicted. And unfortunately, my mother also had plans that would have been messed up if basically what happened is that when I had the three main surgeries, they realized that I needed to go to the hospital at least once every month for almost 1 year, for 15 months, I can say. And I also needed to have other 8 more major surgeries. So it was because of that that my mother realized that she had to stay with me for that length of time, or she had to come with me every month, which would have been very expensive. So unfortunately, she had a family to take care, and she had a very complicated decision to make. And since she had someone she definitely trust, she left me in the hands of that person. I was basically age 12 at that time, so that's how I found myself in India from age 12 to basically now. I went back to my country once at least, but I basically grew up here. And from my adolescence to now, well, I've gone through a lot of things, like especially I haven't heard anyone with a similar story to mine. I know there are mostly people who have gone through what I've gone through in a sense. You are blind and I mean visually impaired, yes, and you are left in a place that is far away from the family and you don't even know the language, nor the culture. So it wasn't easy. And the way I basically adapted is a bit strange because this place where I was basically like the youngest African, and it was quite popular because it was a prime destination for a Congolese student who completed high school and wanted to do their graduation. So during that time, I was left with a
Hans?
Audible?
Okay. Hans?
Yes.
Hans? Okay. Hans, please keep your camera off. Okay.
Oh, it did.
Okay. Typically, camera off means better chance of it staying with us. Okay, man. No problem.
Okay.
So let me
Okay.
just, so no worries. I
Mhm.
paused the recording. So what you're going to get into again is explaining how, I want you to pick up the sentence where you said, I'm going to say, I'm
Mhm.
basically going to say three, two, one. And what you're going to have to pick up with,
Mhm.
okay. Okay, got
Mhm.
it. All right. Perfect.
Mhm.
So Hans, when I say,
Mhm.
let me wait for the voiceover to stop so I can think. When I
Mhm.
say three, two, one, you're going to take a
Mhm.
breath and then you're going to say, I want you to dig into the story where you said something about, so
Mhm.
I was 12 years old in India and used to how it was, as you were saying, something about, growing up in Africa in the jungle and then having to be a 12-year-old in India. So that's where I want you to pick up the conversation, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Come on over to your microphone, okay? Come closer first. Let's see if we can get it
Okay.
nice and strong. Come all the way up to your microphone.
Okay. Am I audible clearly?
Perfect. Don't move. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Again, you're going to take a breath. When I say one, you're going to take a breath, and then you're going to get into. So I was 12 years old in India, and I was left with this person. Okay. So here we go.
Yeah.
No problem. So three,
Mhm.
two, one.
Okay. So, basically, as I was saying, I was left 12, like I was around 12-year old when I was left here, and I was visually impaired. At the time, my vision was even lower than now, and I also didn't know the language nor the culture. So it was like a major shift for me, mentally, physically, and I had to do a lot of adapting very fast and quick. The first thing I noticed is that I had a lot of social problems because, well, the thing is that at that age, I tended to forget that I couldn't be a child anymore. Mommy and daddy and the rest of the family were far away, so it was time for me to grow up. So I believe that I had butted a while with the person who was raising me because at the end of the day, I was being capricious and the person didn't understand why I was being capricious. But, well, let's just say that it wasn't easy because one thing I've learned at that age is that, especially from that entire period, one thing I've learned is that when you are visually impaired or blind in general, people tend to think that, by people, I mean sighted people, they tend to think that they necessarily need to babysit you. One thing I've noticed at the time is that people often underestimated my abilities. Because let's put it this way, if a child of my age, 15-year-old, asked any African friend, like, can I come and stay for the weekend? Anybody who asked someone at that time would have probably received a yes. But when I did the same, people used to say no. Not because they didn't like me, because they thought that if I go to stay with them, they'll have to babysit me. They'll have to cook for me because I even remember whenever I went to people, they still ended up doing for me things that were not necessary, like draw for me a bath, things like that, make for me breakfast. And I can clearly see that it is the kind of thing they will tolerate doing it for 1, 2 days, even a week, but they'll never like to do it for months or years. So unfortunately, and I mean, without any exception, even right now, there are a bunch of people. If I ask them, can I come and stay for a while, they'll just say no. If another person asks them, they'll say yes. But to me, they'll say no because they just don't know that I'm independent. They just underestimated the way my abilities to do things. This is why when I finally when I was finally tired of feeling like a burden to people, like I was tired of being treated like a child who needed help for everything. That it almost affected my mental state to a point where my mom judged that it will be appropriate for me to just find my own place to stay. So at almost age 17, I moved out to find my own place to stay. And I can say that is finally when I experienced life as an independent person because for the first time I had to live by my own, it was really scary. I can still remember the night when I finally was like moving from my kitchen to my living room, and it finally occurred to me that I was alone and in a place where I was not even living in an African community, basically in a place where everybody were Indian. The the ease I had with the Indian society is that since I grew up here, I learned some of their local languages, so it was very easy for me to integrate with the local population. However, I was still, the black sheep, literally. Not in a sense that I was a sheep, but almost literally. So the point here is that when people started seeing that I can actually have my own homestead, that is when they finally realized that as a blind person, I can still manage to live on my own, maintain a good hygiene, be able to eat well, and do things like everybody else. And I could also, because I used to remember people coming to visit me, and you can I can see the surprise on their face when they see things are neat. I don't know, they probably expected that if they come here it will be like a house that belongs to a pig. They just find everything messy, but when they opened the door and realized that it was clean, it smelled nice, everything was well kept, they they all often acted like it was such a huge achievement. It was a bit condescending and patronizing, to be frank. In the beginning, I was enjoying the compliments, but eventually I started feeling less proud and more insulted. Like I used to say to myself, what do you think that just because I cannot say that means I should live like a pig? I still have hands and legs and other senses. It's just my vision is gone. But I learned to not to not depend on other people's opinion to just do what I think is good for myself, and as long as I don't hurt anybody. And when I started college, I faced another issue. The college I was admitted in had no blind student experience. So I was the first one since the university was implemented. So they had no experience. I mean, technically it was a college because the thing here with Indian educational system is that there is the main university in which most colleges, which can be considered to be institutions, are affiliated with. Basically, what happens is that they can teach, but when it comes to the final exams are conducted by the main universities, and only few institutions have been given that authority to call themselves universities. And I was in one of those colleges where basically they were like an extension of the main Bangalore University. So you might be wondering what happened to my medical situation. Basically, what happened is that after 2 years, I was eligible to go back if I wanted to. But at the time, I have already almost finished high school, so it was pointless anyway. If I had gone back to my country, the educational system would have been incompatible. So I would have I would have been forced to start again since I've already started here, so there were no point going back. My parents just said to finish everything here, so that's why I stayed. Although my medical situation didn't require me to stay any more longer if I wanted to. And yes, so when I joined my college, unfortunately, I noticed that the teachers taught me like I was a sighted person. They never bothered whether I understood. They just came. They will put things on the blackboard and just expect me to somehow find a way to adapt. The thing with the blind educational system in India, it is very much underdeveloped. It is not. This is why I'm often impressed and surprised when I talk to my Western friends and they say that there is an accessibility department at their college, at the universities, where there is someone who makes sure that they have all equipment. They make sure that they have magnifying glasses. They make sure. I mean, all these things sound so amazing to us. We don't have all of that. If you somebody throw you in a university, you got to adapt yourself. Find a way to study. Nobody will care whether you have a magnified glass or accessibility thing. They don't even know what it is. So that's the situation where I found myself. Like I basically had to tap my mate on the shoulder who was sitting beside me and ask him, "Hey, do you see anything on the board? Can you tell me what it is?" Because the teacher won't even bother. I mean, they were clearly looking at me like, hey, dude, I'm not paid enough to care about you. So it was clear that they have no idea and they have no motivation to even try. So that's what when COVID struck in 2019, I got a job and I started working there and everything seemed to go fine. College, my college was on break like most universities around the country because of the lockdowns. But when the lockdown was over, we had to go back. And I realized that what was the point? I was paying them every year to teach me, and I found myself teaching myself because I had to go back home, go on YouTube, go on, buy online courses to just teach myself what the teacher was unable to teach me. So what was the point? I was basically paying them for allowing me to sit in a classroom. That's what I realized. And I went back and told them that they either have to change something about and try to find a way to integrate me while in their institution, or I'll just stop coming. And it was clear that they didn't care. So I stopped. And I worked for a while because eventually I thought that I had enough with India. It was time for me to move to new, greener pastures. So I was supposed to do that last year, but things happened and I found myself stuck for another more year. So because from that, I started learning computer, and since then, well, I am an intermediate Python student. So that's basically my life trajectory so far. Thank you.
Absolutely fabulous. I think you've made a lot of really, really stimulating points today. Points that, you also have to understand that a lot of the world has never really heard this story before. I mean, sure, we've heard of people leaving Africa for other countries. That's been going on forever. But I've never heard, and we've never heard here on this podcast, and I ventured it would be safe for me to say, Hans, that there are
Mm.
not many podcasts where someone from your background of experience and knowledge and humility, that's one thing that I can tell is that you're a humble person and a kind person. It's very clear to me that you're in the right and that you have had quite the journey. So yeah, so I mean, exactly right now in India, are you, a student? Do you teach computer science courses to other blind people? Exactly what are you doing? I also think that you have a lot of knowledge about. I think you mentioned that you set up some sort of organization, or I know you do a lot of advocacy work in India, right? And for people in your native Democratic Republic of Congo, right?
Yes, basically, we started a group in which I was not very much an active member. Let's say I was mostly like a counselor. a group of friends have created a kind of organization that would help assist blind people who want to integrate the professional environment because it was not well developed in India. Like there is no organization that would find for you a job and just place you there. Now there are few, but you still have to pay them something. So they wanted to set up something similar. And I thought, well, Nuru, where I studied, because as I told you, there when I was in a blind school, I was using sighted script. But when I finally came in a sighted school in India, they finally gave me Braille. That's how I basically learned Braille in a sighted school. That's ironic. So yes, I realized that Nuru in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is 2,345,000 square kilometers. I don't know how much it will come in miles, but it's just quite big. It's basically the 11th biggest country in the world with a population that is close to 100 million, and there is only two blind schools, as far as I know. And in those two blind schools, one blind school has an approximation of 400 students. The other one has an approximation of 150 something students that include girls and boys in a country that has 100 million people, which if I can if I can estimate that at least 500,000 are blind, that will basically mean that a very huge portion of the blind community is illiterate and others probably have no hope to be educated one day. Because those two blind schools, I'm very much confident that they don't cover even 10% of the blind educational need. Like, let's take, for example, in the city of Bangalore alone, we have almost around 67 schools for the blind.
Ooh la
And
la.
yes, there are a lot, not
Okay,
include
that says something about society. That's a lot of if there's 67 schools in a city for one group of people, that's a clue. That's a clue that there's a situation. Wow. Yeah.
exactly. And that in those, I believe there are a bunch of main schools and there is a bunch of tiny institutions that are mostly meant to, I can say not all 67s are school per se. Some are just organizations that teaches other skills. But at the end of the day, I know there are around 67 institutions that are meant to teach something of value to a blind person, no matter they're young or old. So that is just in one city. So I know that the entire Indian subcontinent has a lot of blind schools. So one thing is for sure is that a blind person will never have to look far to be educated. And a parent won't, and most of them are actually free. I rarely heard a school that you need to pay. Most of them I know they are funded by the public, I mean by companies and by they just most of them are registered as ONG, so they don't make student pay. But Nuru, where I studied, they made us pay. And the saddest thing is that in that school, 90% of the students who came there were all came from poor families. I know a couple of blind people who were born from rich families, and with I mean there are those blindness that you can't help, you can't solve even if you are from a rich family, like those who are born blind by birth. I know a couple of some parents are ministers and big entrepreneurs, and I know that all of them are being sent to study in luxurious French schools, schools in the UK. So none of the parents with the blind kids in my country with enough money will let them study. Example, me, for example, my mother didn't want me to come back again. She said, feel like you're blind, come here and they will destroy your life. Stay there and find a way to find a future there. She knew it. And I know so that this is to tell you that those blind people who are stuck there, they have no money. And unfortunately, the blind schools that are available there, they ask them to pay money. So you have a lot of parents who think, why should I spend money for this blind kid who probably won't achieve anything? I'll just spend money on his siblings because on average, African families have at least have 5 kids on average. So they know that most of the blind kids have at least 4 to 5 siblings. They just say, you have siblings, I'll pay their education and they will take care of you. If I pay for you, what you gonna do? That's the point. Companies will never give them a job. They'll discriminate against them. The only thing that most blind people can do is law. And even in that, is still, I mean, even in that, it's not that simple. They don't do law because they want to be lawyers. They do law because they are hoping to become professors. And that is very competitive. So there are many blind lawyers with a master in law and are still uneducated, unemployed. So it's not easy. And unfortunately, there is a world outside there, a world full of possibilities, a world that is built on technology, that it is almost equal for blind people too. So my point was to build a society, an educational system that is built on technology that would allow to finally bring accessibility back to the blind community back in Africa, not only Congo, in most of African countries, because our campaign will be all over Africa. So we started an institution, Oasis, by one of my friend. His name is Caleb. I'm hoping that one day he'll also come and he'll mostly tell you more details about the institution more than me because he's the one is on the field there. He's gonna join me soon here in India because we need to buy equipment for the institutions. We need to buy printers, styluses, many things we need because the institution is almost over. It will be inaugurated by April. So we need to come and buy all the necessary equipment to launch the system itself. So basically, for the first time, will be the first school for the blind that is absolutely free. And not only that, kids got to learn how to use computers from a very young age. They'll be taught how to become accessibility tester. They'll be taught how to become programmers. They'll be taught how to sustain themselves. That our goal is to teach the blind community that there are possibilities even if you lost your vision. You don't have to be stuck in this system. And also, we kind of also do a lot of campaign with the German embassy and some global organizations. And also, we are also in touch with our government to kind of implement a system that would allow blind people to have more opportunities in companies and jobs. But one thing is for sure is that technology is our main focus with the introduction of artificial intelligence and all this. I believe that blind people will be able to do things that they were unable to do before. So that's our goal. Yes.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So basically, because you speak in such a beautiful way, in such a dynamic way, you give so much good info. But basically, what you really want to do is you and this other man, you guys want to set up an institution there in Bangalore where blind people can come from all over India and not only get an education in IT and programming and things like that, but also one of the caveats for me, and one of the things that I kind of want to circle back to and stress it again, is that it's not enough to educate a blind person. It's also necessary that the blind person gets gainful employment after completing the education. That's another
Um,
trick. See, because
yes.
you can educate people, and I tremendously applaud you. You can educate people all you want, but here's what it comes down to. If they never get a
Mm,
job after getting educated, then eventually blind people will stop getting educated. So
absolutely.
it's very tricky. You have to give just the right education, and
Absolutely.
there also has to be the right opportunity afterwards. And if your organization is able to somehow bridge that gap and provide that for people in India and in Africa, wow, is all I will say. You will help a lot of people. Do you know what my saying is here on Aaron's Opinion that proves this point? Do you know what my slogan is? We say
Uh,
we say help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow. And
Even
literally,
more,
if you set this thing up and if you get this organization going and you really, I mean, think about it. If you educate only one other blind person in India in IT, let's say, and then they get a job, you just helped 1 million people in India.
absolutely.
No,
But I need
nope,
to
nope.
tell,
Yeah, yes, yes.
no?
Go ahead. Go
Uh,
ahead.
so basically, the organization is not in India.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, yeah. In India, there are, as I told you, enough institutions as it is. Basically, the organization is in Africa, not only the one country, but most of the countries there, because there are a lot of blind. There is a huge portion of the blind community that never even touched a computer.
Right.
So our point here is to promote technology and educate, starting from kids, teaching them things that are relevant and likely to give them a future. Because at the end of the day, they go in universities and learn things that won't help them in the end. And they end up with useless degrees like communication, journalism, law, and things that nobody will ever even, give them a job. So we will teach them courses that we know that as a blind person, they will have opportunity not only in Africa, but all over the continent. So it
Right.
is most, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So this is your organization, basically your NGO that you're in the process of establishing all over Africa to basically help all of these try to help all these blind people. Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, that this is a big issue, and it's one that we need to solve this. Our generation needs to solve this for sure. As you get to know me better,
mm,
um, and as you get to know my community here at Aaron's Opinion, we have several, as I would say, we have several correspondents in Tunisia, who also have a lot of the same goals that you do and would probably be very interested in this type of organization. So I can definitely think of several people. I've interviewed several people from other countries around the continent of Africa. I've interviewed two Gambians,
mhm,
two Tunisians,
mm,
and then one South African. Oh
ah,
yeah. Oh yeah, and you know what? Several South African people. You know what? I'm going to tell you once you join my WhatsApp group, man, I'm going to tell you to contact specific people in that group, and explain
oh,
your situation, and they will definitely be interested, and they'll definitely give you some knowledge about people that you could contact. But this is definitely doable. Certainly
yeah,
with podcasting, and certainly with our community. This is the goal we're going to achieve. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
so,
that's all really incredible, man. On a lighter note, um, how do you how do you like to spend your free time? When you're not working, studying. How do you spend your free time over there? By the way.
oh, my free time is way well. I mean, I have a couple of hobbies. One of my biggest hobbies is literature. I love reading and mostly I love writing. So I
Mm-hmm.
read, write a lot, and that's how I spend most of the time. Just if I'm not occupied by computer, is reading, writing, or basically talking to my partner. So that's mostly how I do most of my days. Yep.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So, how familiar on it? I'm just curious because sometimes I find that people are either very familiar with the podcast space and the podcast sphere, as I call it, and other people are less familiar. So, there in India, were you always an avid podcast listener? Have you been on any Indian podcasts, and have people ever interviewed you about your life there in India?
No, this is the first time I was interviewed, and the Indian culture is not strong on podcasting. At least
Mm-hmm.
the Indian culture is divided in three levels. And one of the highest level is the mostly westernized and open-minded one, the one that is connected to the outside world, and the one that lives out of the Indian bubble. But there is also the one that is mostly stuck on the traditions and still kind of weave into the same social patterns. And basically, the blind people community is in that. They listen to local music. They do most of them don't even use Spotify. They have special homemade apps that are only, broadcast their own music. So I don't think none of them has even a podcast app on their phone. They listen to the radio, but
Yeah.
that's, yeah, I think
What it is that, well, Hans, what it is that if you have a smartphone, the smartphone does have a podcast app, but the trick is that you have to know that it's a podcast app. You have to know
indeed.
you have to know what it is, and you have to know how to open it. You would be, I mean, you probably wouldn't be shocked. If you walked around outside there in Bangalore and you asked
Uh-huh.
people, "Hey man," if you came up to someone, "Hey man, do you want to listen to a podcast?" They wouldn't even know some of them wouldn't know what it is. And then if you showed
It,
them
no,
like the
most,
app, they would,
most definitely most won't.
yeah.
And the that does, they probably
Hmm.
came to know podcast from popular podcaster like Joe Rogan. That's actually the most that they got introduced to podcasting. But
Hmm.
when you talk about the inner working of the society itself, I don't see anybody being popular. Like you cannot ask an Indian who is the most popular podcaster in India. They will say, "What is even a podcast?"
Yeah,
So
yeah.
no, they have other means to interact, yeah, and podcast
Hmm.
is none of them. At
That's
least for
very and I think that's a huge illustration socially of the Indian people. They are people that are not attracted to that form of media for a variety of reasons, but I do understand. We do though.
technically even in
Hmm.
I mean even in Africa,
Hmm.
I don't know anybody, I mean, even if I look in my own family, I don't,
Hmm.
none of them even know what's a podcast. So it's
Yeah.
not an Indian issue alone. So it's like, I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
new thing. New thing.
Ironically, India on my country list and my analytics, and my tools that help me to see where my downloads come from, India is always in second place or third place. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people from all the main cities in India who are downloading Aaron's
Huh.
opinion. So they do listen, but
Oh,
perhaps maybe, yeah, but perhaps now I haven't seen Bangalore on the list. So maybe not in your part of the country, but in the main capital and the main major cities
definitely.
with downloads. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
That's good. That
Yeah.
it means there's no awareness because the podcast culture only holds with direct streaming of audio.
Hmm.
Like Spotify, you see, that's like Spotify, Apple Music. Who this means that podcast became a thing. But in
Hmm.
places like Africa, things people don't keep stream things yet. Movies,
Hmm.
they download it up by ripping it from like pirate website, or they just
Yeah.
buy it from cyber. There's cyber cafe. They go there, give money, and they'll buy movie CD. Music,
Hmm.
there are a lot of sites that you can download MP3. So I don't see there is literally no one even using Spotify as far as I know. So without
Yeah.
Spotify and other like Apple Music,
Oh,
there's no
there's
podcast.
a lot of
So
choice. No,
nobody
no, no.
knows.
It's not just those two, Hans. As you know, there are
Yeah.
many choices. There's like 10 different choices for downloading a podcast, and it's a ton of things. Anyway, though, all extremely interesting. No, and I also have a lot of downloads from South Africa and Nigeria and sometimes Gambia and Egypt.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
you do get some downloads, but overall, you're right. There are still a large percentage of people that don't understand podcasting, but that's fine because I know that after they listen to your episode and after you
Mm-hmm.
share this with people, I know that this is going to turn them onto it and help them to understand, a little bit more about your life and your wisdom and who you are as a
Yes.
person. So yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that you have a lot of questions for me, and I want to know, what do you really want to know? What do you really want to know about Aaron's
Okay.
opinion?
So why do I have a question? Okay. Um, what is the biggest lesson you have learned after interviewing so many people in regarding to the blind community in general?
In regarding to that, I've learned over time that we need to be active listeners. We need to actively listen, and we need to be willing to understand that people come from different perspectives. And that's really the main thing, is that everybody has a different perspective and a different life experience. And this is a
Yeah.
very, very, very important thing. and a very, very important concept that is oftentimes misunderstood. You know,
Yeah.
everybody has a different opinion, and that's okay.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And
So, mhm.
okay. And another thing is that I think that's fine. I think that's what I wanted to know actually, because I was wondering. I mean, for someone like you, have talked with so many blind people all around the world. I would
Mhm.
have expect you that you have a lot of interesting story to say because people share to you their experience. So you have learned a lot of perspective on how people approach their handicap from various perspective. Like
That's true.
society shape the way we view the world. A blind person in Africa will probably be will have more despair. A blind person in America will
Mhm.
probably have hopes, and it's just depend on how the society is looking after. So I guess that you probably have learned a lot of things from us. I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, Hans, there are blind people around the world who have a lot of despair and hopes. But what I find that actually, and you may in fact disagree with this to some extent, but I find that a blind person's perspective and their expectations are really primarily about their parents and their family. If your parents push you in the right direction, then you'll hopefully go a little bit further, you know. Now I can
Yeah.
understand that where you know, in DR Congo, you know, it would be tremendously more difficult to go far. And I totally
Yeah.
get that. But also too, parenting and people are the same everywhere. You know, if parents truly love their children, if they truly are active parents, they will still encourage their children to be educated and to have what they need to be successful, you know.
Uh,
So, I mean, the fact that you were kind of left in a sense, you were kind of left to fend for yourself in India a little bit, you know, that was hard, but you know, that might have been the right, I don't know, that might have been the right decision. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting thing
no,
to digest. Do
no,
you think it
it is
was, do you think that was the right choice for your parents to just leave you in India when you were 12?
absolutely because at the end of the day, I always look at it as a glass half filled. So I need to look at the. It is very easy to focus on the empty portion, complain about it, but when I look at the filled portion, I realize just the benefit I got from it. This is what shaped the man I am today. And at the end of the day, even as you said, parents are really important in shaping the view on life of their child who is blind. But also, those parents also most of the time they act out of ignorance because I've noticed that sighted people tend to overestimate my misery. In a sense, they look at me, I'm visually impaired, and they assume that I'm very miserable. Like they cannot understand how can a blind person be happy because they cannot imagine themselves without their eyes. They don't realize that I have met blind people who are more happier than them. So I believe that parents are mostly ignorant, and creating a system that has the objective of educating the parents and creating awareness and teaching them that if you get a blind child, don't think that he's destroyed because of that. There are blind people who have succeeded in it. That's the point. We want to be the examples. We want to be the kind of blind people who change our society to a point where the parents will point us as the role model and say, if these guys can do it, why not my child? Because before us, you cannot point a blind person and say, this blind person did something. No, no blind person ever done anything significant. But
Right.
this first blind school built by blind people. Parents will look at us and say, yes, just because they lost their vision, that doesn't mean that they are doomed. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now today, now that you're in Bangalore, you know, I love Indian food. I love talking about food. So certainly you have a favorite Indian meal now. What is your favorite Indian food?
It's a cliche, but I'm more a man who enjoy biryani. I mean, biryani as a it's a
Mm-hmm.
nostalgic food. I mean, in a sense, that is the first thing that most of our Indian brothers introduce you to because it's like I can say, mascot for Indian
Uh-huh.
meals.
Uh-huh.
So I'm a more a man who's into biryani for now.
I
But
love, you know what I love? I love lamb biryani. No, I
oh,
mean, Nothing is better than spicy lamb biryani or
It
goat or
is.
nothing is
We call
better.
mutton biryani, and it is a staple of the Islamic community. They have developed all skills to make it tasty. So yes, mutton
Right.
biryani is the best.
Absolutely. There are so many great things. So, you know, have you, Hans, have you encountered any American people in Bangalore who've spoken to you or who you have encountered?
American people, yes, I did encounter American people almost since I was 12 from our school. Our school was in association with the Carnegie Mellon. I think is it a university?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, Carnegie
Yeah.
Mellon University, indeed.
So
Yes.
they used to develop prototypes for blind, like the Braille tutor thingy that we used to use to teach Braille. So they
Mm-hmm.
used here around June to make us test those prototypes and give our opinion. So they used
Mm.
16 American. It was from there that I started interacting. I think they were the first American I ever saw in my life. But now, talking to Americans is like a daily thing now. But face to face, I have met a lot. Like there are communities I know that are filled with Europeans and Americans that I can go and interact. But yes, I have done it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that is all really, really incredible. And maybe a couple more final questions here. So have you been back to DR Congo since? Like do you ever still go back there?
Yes, I did. In the month of 2016, in the year of 2016, sorry, I went there. I finally saw my family after
Uh-huh.
almost 4. And then I was meant to go, as I said, I was meant to go right when COVID came and created some issue.
Ah,
But yeah, but yes, I've been there. But I
yeah.
felt like so. That's the irony. India feels like home. My childhood friends are mostly here. I mean, what I consider to be my new childhood friends are here. But whenever I go
Right.
there, I feel like a foreigner. People have moved
Yeah.
on. They don't
Yeah.
know
And
me anymore.
you are Indian now. You're an Indian guy now. So yeah.
In every most sense of the word, yes, I am.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
that's really fascinating how you know how you just start out in one country and then you end up you end up in some other society. That's deeply
eh,
fascinating. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But glad that I didn't forget my mother tongue. I'm horrible at it. Not too horrible. I'm actually kinda decent. But when I talk to my friends who go up there, I can still recognize that no, I have made big strides in my English, but
Hmm.
my was affected with the lack of usage, but it is still quite good. And that's one of the things that I lose that identity, that aspect. That would have been like the last blow
Right. Right.
or
Yeah.
country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I mean, how many languages can you speak like fluently now?
Fluently, I can speak English, I can speak French, I can speak Swahili. That's like our version, not the Tanzanian one. We can still understand, but
Uh-huh.
we'll have to make a couple of translation, but it's Swahili nonetheless. I can speak Lingala. I can also speak Kannada, which is a language spoken in Karnataka, the state in which Bangalore is the capital city. I can also speak a little bit of Tamil, and but in the language I can speak fluently is mostly 4 to 5. But the one I can actually make some things here and there is mostly Spanish, and yeah.
Wow. So mostly you can have the majority of your conversation is either English or French, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
weirdly.
Mm.
And I tend to drift unconsciously. Like when I talk to my French friends, I will end up using English words. And when I talk to my, I try to mix. Like, for example, when I talk to my siblings, I tend to go through three languages. So,
Hmm.
yeah, Swahili is Swahili, French, and English are the ones I use often.
Well, that's so good. That's so good. So yeah, I mean now by the way, I have never been to DR Congo, but I have been to Eswatini, Swaziland. So I can kind of imagine what DR Congo must be like a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you know like what town did you grow up? Like what town were you born in? Like what, you know, can you Do you remember the environment enough to tell me about the environment in DR Congo and like what it looked like?
Absolutely. Contrary to public opinion, the DRC Congo is not a place of war, like how we always, because when you speak to people, they tend to think that it is a war-torn area. But no, trust me, that place I've seen less war than Afghanistan. The only place where you got to see some skirmishes, it's only at the borders on the borders between Rwanda and Goma, which is an eastern city of Congo, and that is only within villages. But in the entire country, we never saw war since we got independence. And in my entire life, I never heard a gun being shot in my local area.
Really?
So I grew up in the city of Likasi. Not too, this town was not too small, but it was not too big. And I basically studied in another city, which is Lubumbashi, previously known as Elizabethville. And there, that's where I basically got my primary education. And it's I cannot say beautiful city, a very packed city. It is quite nice. It has some great places here and there. But overall, it is one of the prettiest city you can find, at least on a Congolese standard. Like basically, that's where people go, either Lubumbashi, Kinshasa, or Kolwezi. That's the three cities. And yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that's what.
Well, that is really that's really wonderful. So I just want to say that this has been truly an incredible recording today. Absolutely amazing, man.
Thank
So here's what I would like to say. I'm
Yes.
gonna actually gotta stop that. Um, so now we come to the end of another great recording, and we say that thank you for joining us. But I do want to say this. If you can ask me, Hans, only one more question to
Yes.
really make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you
Yes.
really want to know?
Okay. Is there really a political opinion that you will go out of your way to not allow to be expressed on your podcast?
No. I will allow every opinion to be expressed, even if I don't agree. Over the years, we've been doing this now for 4 years strong, and just actually next month will be 4 years, believe it or not. Wow. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I just realized that myself. Wow. Hans, there have been, I will say this out loud, there have been maybe over the past 4 years only about three guests that I have had to that I have had to send to that I've had to send to the penal colony.
Why?
There's only been a couple people that I've had to send to my version of Nouvelle Caledonie. Um, sometimes guests do.
Uh,
Sometimes I have found moving
yeah.
forward with certain people and certain guests. Sometimes guests have proven to be dishonest. One of them in particular was doing something that I felt was highly unethical or even perhaps against the law. Um,
Okay.
there's been, every once in a while you get your oddball in there. You get someone that comes up to you in one way and then you research it further and then you discover they aren't who they say they are. But those guests are always the minority, and the vast majority of people, the vast
Yes.
majority are amazing like you. And that's the
Uh,
important thing.
Three is actually a good number for 4 years. I would have expected a little bit higher, which means
Yeah.
it's a good
Well,
sign. No?
Well, it is, and what it is that people know that when they're on a podcast being recorded, and they know that typically it attracts people who are already in the right to begin with. It podcasting attracts the right people usually. It still attracts bad people. It still attracts the wrong person sometimes, but it attracts generally better people are attracted to it usually. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
All right,
one more.
Hans. Sure. Absolutely, go ask.
Regarding the format of your podcast, have you ever
Sure.
tried uh, like implementing another thing, like in a sense, for example, bringing to guests and try to let them interact
Mm-hmm.
or date
Mm-hmm.
or do that will bring more.
Uh, I
I
have I have. You were wondering about your friend, if we could get your other buddy to your other friend to come back that you were mentioning, and of course I will interview them too. Um,
Yeah.
Typically, Hans, I find that yes, I will interview if you would like. I will interview him and you at the same time, for fun. Yeah, sure, absolutely. I do find though that with two guests versus one, like on one podcast all at once, it's a
Mhm.
lot of it's a lot of voices that are heard, and I find that for a listener, that can actually
Mhm.
be very disorienting and very confusing to hear two or three different
Um,
voices. So
uh,
I don't do it in your case. Actually, I think it may be applicable. I don't do it often because I feel that it's less applicable to do it that way. But in your case, I do agree with you that it may in fact be more applicable. And your friend, your good friend, I forget his name now. Sorry about that. But
it's
your friend,
Caleb. Caleb.
yeah, Caleb. Yes, indeed. Caleb may in fact be more comfortable with speaking to a stranger like me if he knows you're there, which I totally understand. Some people are just more comfortable like that. So yeah, we can definitely get connected and definitely get him
Uh,
on here for
That
sure.
will he'll be very happy to express his goals and ambitions as well. To be frank,
Oh,
he'll
I
be the one
will.
talking. His English is quite good, but not very much because he's more like a French speaker. But he also, I think he'll be more also understandable, but there will be certain point where I'll have to intervene and kind of express what he wanted to
Uh-huh.
say. So I'll be more like a help than anything to him. Like,
You're already a help. You're already helping people. You're a huge help to begin with.
thank you.
You are so welcome. And of course, in that podcast, we can, the three of us can kind of go back and forth with French and English too. By the way, people love it when I speak my second language of French. They get a huge kick out of hearing me in French. They get a huge kick out of that. So that can if it's done right, that can add to the equation, man, and that can add to the power for all right.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
man. Well, look, you have a very I wish you a very safe evening in India and a very healthy evening and I wish you a great night over there in India, man. So
thank
finally, before we walk out of here, finally, if someone wants to get in contact with Hans, how do they do it?
Okay, if anybody, oh my, I never actually, okay, can I do this? Okay, I personally, what about my email address? They
Well,
can
what
actually
about
get,
it?
yes, they can get in contact with me through my email address that is hansilwas@gmail.com.
Okay,
H A.
please. Yeah, here let's include. So click the email in the description. We'll keep that in the description. And until next
Mhm.
time, everybody, thank you, Hans. You're so
Thank
welcome
you.
here, and I will get in touch with you later today over on the WhatsApp. So just keep your ears and eyes open for that. All right.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you so
right,
much, my.
everybody. All right, all right. Well, Hans, you have a good night over there. And as I say here on Aaron's Opinion, thank you so much, everybody. Help one
Thank
person today, help one
and
million people tomorrow.
oh, thank you.
For those of you still, okay, so for those of you still on the YouTube end, thank you for watching, everybody. Click the link in the description and have a good day. All right, so Hans has left, and